it's what moved my heart and soul, not the lyrics. It's
Hmm.
not like listening to Dust in the Wind and feeling the loss of somebody. It's not like listening to Hotel California and not understanding what the words mean anyway. Um, it's about feeling it here
Uh-huh.
in your heart. And I remember as a little kid listening to certain pieces of music that had an element of that that just really moved me.
Welcome to the Modern Sage podcast, everyone. I'm so happy that you're here. We have a very special episode for you today. Before we get there, I just want to remind you of a few things. You can watch these podcasts on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/a girl named Guy. Also, follow me on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, which is at Leah Guy Live, where you can get updates on workshops, retreats, one-on-ones, inspirational quotes, and these podcast clips to be informed and reminded of when they are published. Now, today we're talking about music, but not just any kind of music. We're talking about music that reaches the soul. And not only do we have a special guest, but we have a little bit something different in the podcast today. We're going to share some of the music clips for your enjoyment and for our listening and discussing these beautiful works of art together. We have David Vito Gregoli, and he is a multi-genre artist, a music producer in multiple fields, but he's also very prominent in the New Age music realm. And, you know, a lot of people that don't necessarily listen to New Age on the daily or have a spa, or, you know, we hear these things when we go for a massage or for a Reiki treatment or at a, you know, particular kind of one-day retreat or something. But a lot of people, I think, forget to include this kind of music into their everyday life. And I find so much soothing and grace and peace from this kind of music. And I was so thrilled when David and I, or Vito and I, connected on Facebook. I wanted to bring him on the show and introduce him to all of you. So welcome to the show, Vito.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you're here. And I truly do love what you do. And I thank you, not
Thank
just
you.
for the New Age music, but for the how you input and influence music into all the categories for many years now, which we're going to talk about. So thank you for that. Yeah, so a lot of people, as I mentioned, don't know the word New Age kind of had, you know, its own family for a long time, and it's starting to branch out into the mass public, if you will, in the past decade or two. But tell me what your passion interest is in this New Age or world style music. What captivated you to want to produce music in this way?
Well, first, let me start off by defining New Age for people because that's been a big discussion we've had in the musical community, especially the Grammy community, how to classify New Age music. What is New Age music? The controversy lately has been a clique of ambient musicians and chant artists wanted to have a greater say or a greater presence rather in the New Age category in the Grammys. So they petitioned and very insisted on getting their name put into the title. So now instead of New Age, it's New Age Ambient and Chant.
Oh,
I was one of the oppositions of that movement because I think it dilutes the brand. The
yeah,
same way, let's not change jazz to say jazz, big band, and fusion
right.
or standards. Jazz means nothing. The word means nothing, but everybody understands it.
Yes.
New Age means nothing. It's not about a new age, an old age, an age of Aquarius, any of that. At this point in society, it has probably one of the biggest musical umbrellas in it.
Mm.
There's obviously ambient and chant.
Hmm.
There is neoclassical New Age. There's vocal New Age. I work with a number of really beautiful vocal artists who normally, you wouldn't think of as New Age.
Hmm.
And something I've been very involved in, and you'll hear a little snippet of, is New Age pop. Now, it's a tricky bit because it's musically pop, but the lyrics aren't about love songs.
Right.
They're not about losing a relationship. They're about your relationship to maybe the divine,
Yeah.
or
Still a
maybe
love
it's
song.
it's still a love song. Maybe it's a love song to the earth, to the
Hmm.
planet.
Hmm.
Maybe it's talking about your own interpersonal journey, this kinds of stuff you talk on the Sage podcast.
Hmm.
It incorporates those things that aren't in the mainstream pop world that talk about, especially rap and hip
Yeah.
hop. It's generally not focused in that area.
Yeah.
So my point is that New Age has a huge amount of stuff. There's world influence New Age. I just released an album in June with Ricky Kaj, two-time Grammy winner in the New Age category.
Hmm.
He's well known for his not just his New Age world hybrid, because he's Indian and he brings a lot of that influence in it. He's also a very cinematic composer. So he has these beautiful videos that go along with his album. His last album that won the Grammy was called Divine Tides, which he did with the drummer from the Police, Stuart Copeland, which many people don't realize became a film composer after the
Wow.
Police broke up.
Wow.
So that's one bit of New Age. And then Ricky and I came together, and I brought my vocabulary, and he brought his vocabulary, and we have a new language.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I appreciate you saying that it's such a large umbrella, but in a certain way, I think there's many sectors of people that miss this umbrella because the association with the word new age, or, it doesn't comply with their religious beliefs. That's their perception, or some other reason.
I
And
think more,
yeah,
I just want to interject. I think more often people associate it with elevator music or music they listen to while they're getting a massage.
yeah,
And that's certainly one aspect of New Age. And I think it's a branding issue to, market to the public these other these other subgenres
yeah,
of New Age, so they become aware of it. Because I think with today's world of music, where you have this very uh, almost blinders on mainstream, and yet you go to streaming and you've got a cornucopia of 100 different kinds of pop music, you
right,
know um, power pop, punk pop. I mean, you can go
right,
down the line,
right.
and the
Well,
same
let's talk.
thing is true with New Age.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what new age does for one's mind and soul, because that's what, I want to leave the listeners today feeling maybe more inspired to intentionally seek out new age music, because there is a very beautiful thing that I think goes on in one's mind and soul and the consciousness when we partake in this music, versus, not that there's anything wrong with the other kinds of music at all. I love it all, and I know you're
Yeah,
a music lover too. Um, but when we're intentional about what we're taking in, just like when we're intentional about what we eat, it affects our heart and our mind, our body, and everything. And I think the same is true here. So, what is your feeling about how New Age music, or your music in particular, how it affects someone's mind and heart or spirit?
that's a very big question,
I
and
know.
I think it's a good question that needs to be spoken of. Um, the woman I call the fairy godmother of New Age music, Suzanne Doucette, who's been doing it since the early 70s, along with Steve Halpern and Constance Stamby. She was one of the first. Um, she categorizes it as, what's the intention behind it. She got me into the Grammy uh, screening committee for the New Age, where you listen to all the submissions and you have to decide, is it New Age or does it belong in contemporary instrumental or maybe the global category? So
Mhm,
it's not really a committee that decides anything. It just helps sift,
mhm.
because you could literally submit in any category and they have to decide, does this children's music belong in opera?
Right,
So
right.
the same thing applies to New Age. So the instructions we got, what is the intention behind it? If it has any sort of spiritual, heart-centered content to it, intention behind it, then it's New Age. So when I listen to New Age music, the New Age music that inspired me to get involved in this and all, which came from very disparate places, including classical music, it's what moved my heart and soul, not the lyrics. It's
Mhm.
not like listening to Dust in the Wind and feeling the loss of somebody. It's not like listening to Hotel California and not understanding what the words mean anyway. Um, it's about feeling it here
Uh-huh.
in your heart And I remember as a little kid listening to certain pieces of music that had an element of that that just really moved me. And I began to understand that that was a thread in what attracted me to the whatever music I was doing. And I'd always want to inject an element of that heart connection.
Yeah. Well, before we keep talking, I want to go ahead and share a little snippet with people. Okay, so that clip is called Om Land. Is that the full name of it?
Yes.
All right. Before you tell us where we can find that, I want to share what this does for me. This music immediately takes me internal to a very sweet, safe place, and I want to do yoga, and I want to
Mhm.
breathe and expand myself. And I just, even in my own home, I feel part of a collective. That's what that does for me. Just listening to that 30 seconds. So
That's
thank you.
wonderful.
Yeah, thank you for that. Now tell us where we can find someone who loves that clip. Where can we find this? And tell us about the making of it a little bit.
We can find it everywhere music is sold. It's literally distributed to every streaming service, as far as I know. Um, Homeland was an interesting thing because since mid to late 70s, I'd always been attracted to the symbol Om and the mantra Om. To me, it's supposed to be the primordial sound of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it's always just immediately centered me into my heart center, into my spiritual center. And when the opportunity to finally do something with an Om in it came around, I jumped on it. Um, Again, Ricky Kej, my partner in the latest project, had done an album of Ohms, which included, I believe, just the Ohms that you hear on that, not any of the other tracks. And he played it for me, and I just went, oh man, I've been wanting to do something like that for years. Can we do something and release it in the US? Because it was an India only release. He said, well, I'm not really contractually allowed to do that, but you can borrow the ohms. So I did that. I borrowed the ohms, created the music behind it, and it turned into an amalgamation of ambient fingerstyle guitar, and with steel string guitar, nylon guitar, and a dobro on each of the three tracks, and new age. So um, Ricky worked a little bit with me on some of the synthesizer tracks, and some guidance on it, helped me mix it, but he was basically required by to keep his hands somewhat off of it. And it was just a really fun thing to do. It's 22 minutes each piece.
Mm.
Each of the three pieces are 20 minutes, so it feels like an experience.
Yes.
And I think I put out a 7-minute version of each of the pieces called Homeland, the Shortcuts. In other words, the shortcut to Homeland.
Mm-hmm.
And because radio stations tend to like, most radio stations tend to like shorter pieces, maxed out at 7. That's the new age stations. I mean, you won't hear it on KLOS. But I think having 22 minutes, I come from, my background is film, TV, theater, because my family was in it. I wasn't really in it, but I've been exposed to it for my whole life. So everything I work on, every piece that I create, whether I'm producing another artist or myself, it has to have the arc like a movie does,
Mm-hmm.
or a play, 3 acts. So, it's about contrast. The contrast of the heart center with something slightly dissonant, those little elements, but also in the whole length of the piece. Now, when you have a 22-minute piece, you can either do a lot of it or you can do it very slowly. And because I wanted this to be meditative, there was a certain height I could never get above in terms of energy. So I basically went from here to here in 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So it is like the slowest ramp you can possibly think of. If you were driving it, you would think you were driving straight on,
Mm-hmm.
on a
Right,
line,
right, right.
but it does just very slightly does this. So by the time you get to the end, you go, oh, oh, I remember this. This was over here was much quieter, but you don't feel it. It's a
Right.
little bit like that old saying of boiling a frog, although the image is kind of horrid.
Yeah. It's gorgeous. Well, I like that word experience. And one other thing I would say about a song like this or music like this is that as opposed to other music, and it's not just the lyrics of music, however, that makes a big difference, I guess. I don't feel like this music is telling me to feel a certain way. It's allowing me to feel what I
Mm,
feel. And
wow.
it's a very distinct difference between a song like forcing you a place versus this just kind of lets you unfold to it. And I find, as a yoga practitioner, a meditator, that maybe I'm used to that. I want that, but also I just welcome any moment in our society where I can have my own experience, right? And not have
Yeah.
to be told what it should be by advertisement or some kind of force. So in that way too, I find it very different. Now, just for those listening, a little bit more about David. You've been doing music for a very long time, and as I said in his intro, he's a multi-genre artist, producer. He You can tell us a little bit about the different types of music that you've made in the past. And you're in Beverly Hills, is that correct?
No, I'm in Woodland Hills,
Woodland Hills,
an
okay, and
entirely different bunch of hills.
a bunch of hills, but you're over in the Los Angeles hills.
Yes.
Yes. So tell us with your other music experience, classical, I think you mentioned, jazz. What else have you written, produced, and
I want
played?
to just quickly go back and add something to what I said about Omland,
Oh,
and it's
yeah.
something I think you alluded to is that because it's centered around the Om chant, there's a breath in and a breath out to it,
Hmm.
which automatically, you know, tunes you in. So
Yes.
that was
Yes.
cool.
Thank you.
My background, well, I started off in the 60s seeing the monkeys on TV, getting very excited about that as a 6-year old, and wanted to play drums like Mickey Dolenz.
Hmm.
Trouble is, you can't have a drum set in an apartment building, at least not in 1966. So I eventually got fed up with that and started playing bass because also very shortly after discovering the monkeys, I discovered the world's greatest band that's ever lived, Beatles,
Uh-huh.
which I'm sure most people will agree with me. And that became a huge musical influence. And their diversity, they're going from kind of a neophyte pop band in 62 to about 64, 65, absolutely perfecting the pop song. If you listen to things on Rubber Soul, for instance, that's kind of their height in that. And when they saw that height, they departed from it because they went, now where do we go? So you started getting things like Revolver, Sergeant Pepper's, Magical Mystery Tour, where they're experimenting. So this was the first time I heard Indian music. George Harrison's Within You, Without You. It just
Hmm.
it's entrancing because it's deliberately meant to be entrancing. You
Yes.
know, those
Right.
sounds are meant to bring you into your heart center, to your divine nature.
Right.
So I think when I about 12, I started playing guitar instead of bass for some reason I can't even remember. And I quickly excelled at that and became, very well known in my high school. I was fortunate enough to go to high school with the guys from the band Toto, a
Hmm.
couple years ahead of me. They were also the top session musicians in LA, so they set the bar so high. And was very grateful to be following in their footsteps because it just kept you being very ambitious, very willing to learn and expand. I learned more about jazz. I started studying classical in high school. Went to college, got a degree in classical guitar. I was a double major with history, but that's another subject. Um, and then I started playing in pop bands, in the
Hmm.
80s
Yeah.
and doing that whole 9 yards, almost getting signed here or there. And then 90s, when guitar players became less impressive as grunge came into, I became more focused on working with singer-songwriters. And when you work with singer-songwriters, they often need a musical director the music director is essentially doing the job of a producer, but in the live act.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and from a very early age, I would piss off my fellow musicians that I was playing with because I always had an idea of what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when you're 17, no one likes being told what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I eventually learned how to tame that and realized that I was a music producer
Mm-hmm.
sometime in the 90s and was producing different artists. Um, I moved to Seattle in 98, moved back in 99 after divorce, and decided I'm going to do everything completely different. I'm not going to go out and do gigs to make a living. I'm going to start a record label, do the music I want to do the music that's in my heart, not the music that I think people want me to do in whatever frame that comes in. And the first CD I released was an album of Tibetan chants from a female lama in Seattle, who was born in Tibet. And it was lovely. It was a great experience. And then classical album, a couple of pop albums for some artists. I had a world jazz duo. We did an album. Let's see what else. A classical holiday album, not like Jingle Bells, but the classical music element of it, which I always loved. And finally released my own album, I think in 2006, Yoga Heart Healing,
Mm-hmm.
which you can tell from the title is very directed to people who do yoga,
Yeah.
have a heart, and are into healing. So it was meant to be for massage and yoga practice and things of that genre. So that was a deliberate attempt to hit a specific.
Right.
And I think the next album I released as an artist was the Latin guitar album because I took that away from my classical training. And my mother had always been interested in Latin dance. She was a dancer in the 50s. That's how she met my father. She was very much into the Afro-Cuban movement and Brazilian music. So that seeped into my consciousness as I was learning classical. And then Organic Nylon became the album. And it was really fun to do. Jump ahead to 2013, I did an album called Primordial Sonics, which was deliberately ambiguous in its title.
Mm-hmm.
It was basically new age with a world music and world beat influence. So there was a groove, there was ambient elements, but there was also a good friend of mine, Stephen Kent, is one of the best didgeridoo players in America. He's originally from England. And I had him throw things down on this album, and it gave it that primordial guttural quality. So you
Right.
have that as the bottom, you have the beat, which wants you to move, then all the other new age world elements. There's a little bit of sitar and centaur and a few other tabla all over the place, and then some funky bass.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that kind of was my first dive into world beat, is what
I
I think it's most popular as.
Right. Well, you've done a lot. We can tell you've done a lot of different styles and productions and so forth. Let's go ahead and introduce another song for people, and then so we can discuss a little bit more. Yoga Heart Healing from the album you just mentioned, or The Narrow Bridge. What do you think?
Let's go into Narrow Bridge because that introduces a whole nother element of New Age that I'd love to talk about.
Okay, super.
On this path that we walk, the masters have already walked, and the thing to recall is not to fear.
All right, that's a beautiful piece. Very dramatic. Much different than the first one we heard, On Land. One's got vocals, but the whole tone of it is, I don't know. It almost feels a little, when I say dramatic, maybe like seductive, soulful kind of feeling is what it brings up for me, but with a message, with an important message for all of us. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what the meaning behind the song was?
The song is by Kimberly Haynes, who I've worked with for about 8 years, very close friend of mine, amazing singer. She sings on my last two albums, just wonderfully. She wrote the song in the anticipation of her husband's passing from cancer, which eventually happened in 2020. I think she did this in 2018 or 2019. It talks about the world is a narrow bridge, and that comes from the Baal Shem Tov, who's one of the earliest Jewish mystics and probably one of the most well-known. She kind of took a couple of lines from that and expanded on that, made it into a prayer. So I hear this as a prayer. You hear the depth of the emotion, so you say, oh, it feels dramatic. This is a woman talking about life, the end of life, the beginning of life, what life means. And that's just, every time I hear the song, it just completely gets me. The whole last section, let's see, what is the lyric? In silence. I'm sorry, let me silence my phone. I apologize.
That's okay.
Where is it? There it is. So we'll cut that little bit out.
Yeah.
Okay, ring her off. My apologies again. Where was I?
Every time you hear the song.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember the last lyric. In silence and compassion, we go gently on this journey, something to that effect. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful prayer. And it goes very meditative through most of it with just this flugelhorn playing by Jeff Oster, a well-known New Age musician. And that's because her husband, originally played the trumpet when he was a kid. So that kind of brought that element in. And it's very beautiful and just goes to show you New Age music can be lyrical, as in with lyrics, and deep and meditative and prayerful. I think prayerful doesn't have to be a religious prayer. It has to be a prayer that connects you to whatever you interpret the divine has.
Right. Well, it's interesting that I said seductive, and I just want to, maybe I should be more clear. I don't mean seductive like in a sexual way. It feels seductive to the soul. And now that I hear the meaning more of what you're sharing, and by no means am I looking forward to the next stage of my spirit self. I'd like to stay here as long as possible, but I do have that feeling sometimes, that from a soul feeling of being kind of seduced through this lifetime into the next one almost, and where are we going kind of thing. And that's for me with that song, it takes me there a little bit. Yeah.
That's wonderful. It's having been around very close to the family during Brian's passing, and essentially during the lockdown happened just a month, 2 months afterwards. It's something that I was exposed to in a completely different way than I'd ever been exposed to before. And it was very life-changing.
Yeah.
And we often talk about, what death really means.
It should be more of a conversation for all of us, I believe, just in our
Yeah, we're afraid of death in this society.
Yeah, I know.
And as you said, I'd like to stay here as long as possible. I'm in no rush.
Yeah. And, there's beauty beyond here. I have no doubt. That's the way I feel. When I think about, I used to live in New York City and around New York for years and years and years. And of course, it's a very stressful place. One might say one of the more stressful places to live in the world. But even for those who don't live in a place like New York, many people are stressed out. And we find, we go to the massage and the yoga and so forth to come to a place of peace and stillness and breath and awareness. And so many people are seeking that. And that, again, this kind of intentional music for me, we know music is impactful. It's powerful for our brain state, for our central nervous system, for our memories, so many things. And I just want to encourage all of us to support not just this genre of music and producers like yourself, but also to intentionally seek out this music in your car or in your home. Turn off YouTube for a little bit, or the radio or the podcast even, and find some music like this, because it can help bring us back to balance wherever we are. And we don't always have the time to go get a massage or take a class or, go to the temple and that kind of thing. But each of us has, and this is what, to me, it's a great gift that people like yourself give to us. We have the ability to turn on Spotify or our headset, or, curate a blend of music for us that will intentionally help to rebalance us, to reduce our anxiety, to help us to remember who we are. And that is very, very important, not just in this day and age, as they say, but in general. I think as human beings, you could probably speak to this much better than myself, but we gravitate towards sound and beats and rhythm and all of that for a sense of connection and for soothing. There's a natural groundedness about it. And I think so many people are missing that in their lives right now.
I think when people think about meditation, and I've been a meditator, I started when I was 13. I got into a steady practice in 91 and have been consistently doing it since. Oh, I get bored or I'd be restless. And there's this programming in our society that says you have to be busy, you have to be stimulated. And I see that in my friends' children. The kids want to be stimulated. I wanted loud music when I was a kid. I understand that.
Right.
But the flip side to the human experience is the unstimulated. And because there's still a stigma on going to therapy, seeing a psychologist or whatever of that ilk, people are uncomfortable with their feelings, mostly because they don't understand them.
Right.
And psychology can help you understand them. Meditation can help you get in touch with them and also transcend whatever trauma you're carrying. Because I don't know anybody who doesn't have some sort of trauma from their childhood that they need some healing on, because they bring it into their relationships. Right. So when they're running around, our society has it that people are working sometimes 2 or 3 jobs, no time to do anything, and little time to parent, little time to self-care. We have to turn the society around so people can heal themselves. And as you said, this kind of music is made to be healing. It's made to touch you and get you into a place where you can do self-care. Self-care, some people say, I run for meditation. That's not meditation. That's good for you. It's good to single focus on something that takes you out of the melee of your life.
Right.
But there also has to be quiet, I think, and quiet, they say silence speaks. And it speaks very profoundly, but it speaks very quietly, so you have to listen.
Yes. And a song like this, well, let's play another one because I get really excited. We're going to play Naughty next. Is that okay?
Oh, great.
Okay. All right. When I hear this, I'm just sharing my feedback. Well, that's what I'm doing here. So when I hear this, I think of flow. I feel emotion flowing. It brings me to times when I've done intentional breath work, like different breath work practices that are more elongated, because it takes me on a journey, and that emotional journey. I can imagine listening to this for a few minutes and really going through some stuff. And it's not heavy. It doesn't have to be heavy, dark, deep stuff,
Right.
It makes you want to move, and our emotions want to move. And it brings things up for me, I guess, is what I want to say. It's a beautiful piece, kind of invigorating. If I were to think about it in a term like that, it kind of invigorates my emotions and wants them to reveal themselves. So that's my take on this song. What about you?
This is from my latest album with Ricky Kaj, Wild Monsoon. It's called Nadi, which is Sanskrit or Hindi, one of the two, for river. And when we set out doing this album, Ricky is a very passionate environmentalist, and half of his career is with the UN and the Indian government and UNESCO and all these other organizations, promoting awareness of our climate. He's very active. He's as passionate about that as he is ambitious about his music. And that's
Nice.
something I greatly respect him with him, and something that we bonded very early on when we first met in 2012. I've been passionate about the environment, but albeit much less,
Yeah.
much less active.
Uh-huh.
So when we decided we were going to get ready to release this album, we thought about different titles for the songs, for the album, and as someone who's released 3 or 4 environmentally themed albums, I thought he was more qualified to name the songs, which he did. And he named the first 4 songs after the seasons, then after the elements, waterfall, clouds, rain, and river. And I think, and then one was a remix of a song about Mahatma Gandhi, no lyrics. And I think that's everything. I may have missed one, but you get the general idea.
Yeah.
So this is Nadi River. And the way we worked on this album, because we live on opposite sides of the world, literally, he's in Bangalore, India, and I'm here in Los Angeles, is we would send tracks to each other. We'd kind of start a track and say, okay, here, you work on it. And the other person would put his little touch to it and send it back.
Nice.
And it would become a completely different piece, because it's no longer my vocabulary, it's including his vocabulary. As I said, another language. So that was very invigorating to work that way. And I've never had an experience of working with somebody that was more easy and flowing and copacetic. Neither of us ever said, oh, I don't like that. It was like, oh, yeah, let's dig into that a little more. So this particular piece was a piece he started, and I added elements to. I created a bridge. Like a remixer, I put things in different places. And for me, the image I get is being up at Mount Shasta in one of the little lakes on an inner tube, the gentle breeze blowing, the sound of the birds and the various bugs flying around, hopefully not mosquitoes, and just connecting to yourself, connecting to your heart, and really, maybe it's a river, maybe it's not a lake. It's like you're just gently flowing down the river.
Yeah.
And it's meant to be easeful. A lot of the songs on this album have a lot of world beat elements and a little bit of a rock edge, actually, which is something that was nice to experiment with, bring that aspect into New Age music. But this one was deliberately meant to be easeful and flowing.
Yeah, it is. Well, that's exactly how it feels to me. It's a very flow movement. I can also see it in a variety of scenarios, like at a dinner party and people kind of dancing to it, or there's something very intriguing about the movement that it inspires. So I appreciate that very much. We have one more clip that I'd like to share with everyone, and this one is the yoga heart healing. And you mentioned that you produced this album specifically for those in the massage, yoga, meditation world for their practice and so forth. Is that correct?
Yes, it was deliberately meant to do that. It was a bit of pandering, to be honest. I wanted to make an ambient album, but I also wanted to have a very obvious purpose to it and have people grok what it was meant to be. So I called it Yoga Heart Healing, music for massage and meditation.
I think it's great. Here we go. Wow, that's wonderful. It's kind of what I would call like classic, but you infused it with enough different elements that makes it unique. So, but right away, right now I want to just close my eyes and go into that Zen place myself. But you can see how it caters definitely to any of those experiences, that yoga, meditation, massage, movement, breath work, any of that more internal, but space creating experiences that we all so desire. So this was it what I think you said one of your first?
This was my first release as an artist. I
Yeah.
remember I was doing new age music in the late 70s. I just didn't know that's what it was.
Yeah.
And I didn't think anybody wanted to hear it.
Interesting. Well, they do, and to that point, you're getting quite a bit of recognition with your work. Yes,
A little bit, yeah, a little bit. I
you can
mean,
tell us about it.
I've, been nominated for some minor awards, not a Grammy yet, but I was lucky enough to play on 2 Grammy nominated CDs so far. Um, Other such things. It's more about really just feeling like I'm getting good reviews from bloggers and music reviewers who understand new age music, and more importantly, I'd rather hear from you telling me how you were moved than win an award from anybody.
Right.
Because to me, this music isn't about self-aggrandizement at all. As a matter of fact, I will plug Steve Roach as one of the early ambient composers who influenced yoga heart healing tremendously. And if you ever had a chance to listen to his stuff, particularly his album Quiet Music, it was game changing.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you saying that. And I feel similarly with my work. And recently I was filling out a form. I think it was, to speak at some place or something or another. And one of the questions they ask is like, what awards or what this have you won? And, back in my early days, I could list different notorieties and awards and things like that. And I was thinking, well, I'm not doing this for awards, that's not my concern. And people, especially me being on this end, people pitching me to be on the podcast or for an interview or for this or that. And this, they won this award for their book, or they're at this place in the New York Times. And I think similarly, my work, and that's why I appreciate you saying it, the intention we're not doing it for that reason. It's the contribution to society, to individuals, to make a difference in people's life. And to me, that's the biggest reward that there could be, but I do know people love listening to this music, and I know people love listening to your music. So in that way, you have won.
Well, I think people when they're pitching things and they give their awards, they're trying to create credibility.
Yes.
But in this particular genre, and in probably what you do, the credibility comes from the content.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Another gentleman who I happen to know in this world is Paul Averginos. Are you aware?
Yes, I know Paul.
Okay. Yeah.
I know Paul.
Okay, good. Yeah, I figured you did. And I can't remember where he and I connected, but it's just fantastic work that you're doing. And I'm curious to know where this is leading you in your own spiritual growth and your spiritual life on your personal journey. Where has this work kind of touched you personally and helped you evolve?
That's a wonderful question. Points to you, the interviewer.
Thank you.
As I said, I think I've grown to have a greater awareness of what has always moved me is heart-centered, divine connection stuff. Since I was a little kid, I didn't recognize it as such until probably quite recently, and I'm about to turn 63, so that's a long time to finally get the message. But I've been noticing how I make the choices I make musically. I want to have a divine element. There is a particular piece on Wild Monsoon, what I consider the big, the big number. As if you were doing a stage show, this would be the big number. It's called Bhadra, Rain, and again, my friend Kimberly Haynes is singing all over it. And from start to finish, when Ricky handed me that track, and he did a beautiful rendition of this. A version of this on his Shanti Samsara album. It's very contained and very emotive. And yet here, the one I wanted to create was here. I wanted to have the feeling of floating on the clouds as you're sailing towards whatever you consider the divine. And I utilized a certain beat in it that to me always emotes that floaty feeling. And I had Kimberly put these really emotive vocals on it to really just kind of project it out into that. And that's probably the song that I listen to most and get moved by viscerally. And I generally, when you produce something and you're the artist, you've heard it so many times.
Right.
You know the insides and the outsides, and sometimes it takes a few months of getting away from it before you can listen to it objectively, go, huh, I really would have loved to have done that, but it's quite good. You have that
Right.
perspective. Was when you're doing it, you go, I'm not so sure this is working. You're constantly, checking yourself and doubting yourself and making sure that you cross all the I's and dot all the T's.
Right. Yeah.
You get the inference.
Yeah.
But this one, when I first heard it after Kimberly sang it, I just
Tears.
tears. It's just like, that's it. Mother Lode right there. Boom. And there's other songs in this album that get to that too, but this is one that really touched me, because I think what I started to do with the song is say, I want to take it to this divine place, at least for me. I mean, everybody else has a different view of that, but for me, the place that I resonate with.
Yeah.
And I did that, and it's not just gratifying to have accomplished it, it's moving. And if it moves me, it may move you, or it may move this other person or this person here. A couple other people may not touch them, but
yeah,
music has always been about touching people, whether you're touching their broken heart, touching their anxious heart, touching their avoidant heart. I mean, whatever it is, touching them in some way. Like I said, something like Hotel California has touched billions of people.
right.
Nobody knows what it means.
Right.
The same way they're not quite sure about the Joker. Why do they call him the space cowboy? Let's
Right.
really get into this here.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Well,
So lyrics,
yeah.
don't really necessarily mean anything. It's what it means to you.
Right.
The same way you were saying, oh, this brings this image to me.
Mhm.
Lyrical music, pop music also does that. So
Right. Yeah.
anyway, I interrupted. Sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. No, I like the input, and I do value the music. For people who want to learn more about you, your website, or just go straight to the music.
You can go to vitogregolimusic.com, VITOGREGOLI music.com, to learn more about me, or you can just look me up on Spotify, Amazon, Apple, Deezer, what's it called? Not Tinder.
No, well, I don't know.
What's the one that the rap guy started? Tidal. That's it.
Okay.
Tidal.
Okay.
Pandora. I've been on Pandora since the early days of Pandora. They've been very good to me. And it's a wonderful platform that's not getting as much attention as it likes. Calmradio.com. I mean, everywhere.
All the places, yeah. So support Vito and others like him that are making this music from the heart, for all of our listening pleasure and our healing, and just settling our egos, our troubles, our minds while we're here. I think it's really important. And I'm very grateful. And I thank you for your time and for sharing with us this music. I look forward to hearing more from you, and I appreciate you being on the show.
It's been my distinct pleasure, and I'm so grateful you to have me on here and be able to talk about these things. I hope people resonate with a few things I said and some of the music. It'd be great.
I'm sure they will. Thank you so much, Vito. And to all those listening and or watching, remember to follow on social media at Leah Guy Live on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. And you can go to my website, leahguy.com, to get specific information about my services, books, and more. I hope each of you have a fantastic day, and you'll hear from us real soon.